Hi, I'm Chris Hamby. We're here at Christ Church Cathedral in Indianapolis, and I'm here with Heidi Kim.
Hi.
Heidi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do right now?
Sure. I am the staff officer for racial reconciliation for the Episcopal Church, and I was invited to come here, and I was on a panel yesterday with the PB and the Reverend Lisa Barrowclough and Bishop Andrew Waldo talking about our pilgrimages to Ghana.
So the last question they asked, what was about music?
Yes.
Do you have a response yourself?
Yeah, actually, that question was asked yesterday, and I said the things that inspire me are probably the Bach B minor Mass and Parliament Funkadelic.
and when you're just cruising in your car or in New York walking around, what's your go-to?
It depends on my mood. I mean, I listen to everything from Gregorian chant to boy bands. I actually, when my daughter was 13, she asked for concerts to go to One Direction.
Yeah.
So I took her and her friend to One Direction, and I couldn't hear for 3 days after that because of all the screaming. But I have pretty eclectic musical tastes. Like, I love Alison Krauss in Union Station. Like, who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And my youngest daughter is introducing me to country a little bit more. But I like to dance, so something with, kind of an upbeat kind of thing that I can.
So in Austin, for General Convention, you'll do two-step, right?
Oh yeah. I love line dancing, actually. Yeah. And that's like a very cultural thing, line dancing. So yeah.
So let's get to the serious stuff. What is your favorite aspect of the Episcopal Church?
Well, that's a really great question. I actually came to the Episcopal Church and became an Episcopalian as a young adult because I was paid to sing in the choir. Mm-hmm. And it was very high church, Anglican chant, that whole thing. And that was sort of the thing that introduced me to the Episcopal Church. But I did fall in love with our very traditional liturgy. And I was meeting all of these really wonderful priests who were preaching about radical welcome. Yeah. And so I think that commitment to radical welcome, even when we fall down and don't do it so well, and like the presenters were just talking, and Father Steve was talking about anticipatory hospitality, we're talking about that. We're talking about how can we be the church in the world and not just bring more people into our pews, but how can we be out in the world as followers of Jesus, creating the kingdom here on earth. So I think that's what I really love.
What's your least favorite aspect then?
I think my least favorite aspect of the church is when folks say, well, we're really, really inclusive, but I really don't think that anybody who voted for that person should be a part of this community. So we will talk about diversity and inclusion, but we're not willing to be inclusive in terms of maybe political ideology. Yeah. And I think that if we really want to be committed to diversity and inclusion, then that has to be a commitment to all perspectives, all beliefs, and that instead of shutting each other down, we need to try to engage one another with what we have in common.
So everyone's at the table.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that everybody took a couple steps back after the 2016 presidential election, and that we need to kind of make up that ground again about what does it mean to live in diverse community. And so we all have work to do on that.
And so where do you see the future of the church, and especially within your area of expertise?
With racial reconciliation? Yeah. I think I have daughters who are 18 and 20, so they're kind of borderline millennial Gen Z. Yeah. And the way that they think about racial justice and healing, when we are talking about that in a way that is authentic and meaningful, that's evangelism for our church.
Yes.
So I think when we show up as reconcilers and healers, and when we are committed to that, including reconciling with the person who voted differently than we did, then that is what draws people to us to say, oh, I want to learn more about that, because that's a hard thing to do. And I know that for my own daughters, part of why they like the Episcopal Church is because I get to introduce them to people like Steve Lawler and Sandra Montes, and people who are just sort of having this really wonderful, welcoming, radical welcome of the Episcopal Church.
So now that we've gone through yesterday of Missional Voices, halfway through today,
yes,
where do you see? What have you heard that excites you, and where do you see the church going in the future? You mentioned your daughters are young, Gen Zers, kind of, and where do you see them being in 20, 30 years from now with kind of this new conversation happening in the church?
I think for them, we live in the Seattle area, which is very unchurched. We call it the land of the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S. And so it's very countercultural for them to even have any involvement in the church or with any kind of religious faith. I think for them, they're really attracted to what deacons do.
Yes.
And so I think for their generation, the way that they view ministry is as a diaconal ministry. I don't know, my older daughter is interested in the diaconate, so maybe, and I have a feeling maybe my younger daughter might be a priest someday. But I think that they cannot conceive of a church that's not engaged outside of its walls. So I am hoping that I get to be in more spaces with younger people so that I can learn from them. I think we don't create enough space for, Gen Z, millennials. We talk about them a lot, like they're disobedient pets. Yeah, and that's, instead of talking to them and listening to them, and I think if we could do that in a more authentic way, we would be learning a lot about the things that we maybe take for granted in our church, that generation is saying, no, these are the things that are really beautiful that are drawing me in, and let's hold those things up.
So, and where do you see, last question, where do you see the future of our church as a whole, structurally and everything, in 20 years from now? Do you think it'll exist how it does, or? That's a tough question.
It is a great question, and in fact, I was just at the revival in Honduras, and my colleague, Dr. Catherine Meeks from Atlanta, and I were having a conversation with Bishop Curry, and Dr. Meeks was saying, the institutional church, as long as it supports the work of ministry and being followers of Jesus, great. Yeah. But when it doesn't, I'm not going to be committed to keeping the institution alive. And Bishop Curry's response was, the wild card in all of this is God. So I really kind of love that image. God is the wild card. We don't know where God is taking us. And, my prayer is that we as the people of God and that we as the Episcopal Church will be open enough and that we can be still enough to hear what that is, that we're not so caught up in, sustainability and, stewardship and all of those terms that we can get caught up in, that we fail to hear what God the wild card is calling us to be.
And any closing thoughts about Missional Voices or this kind of evangelism movement that's taking place?
This has been wonderful to be here. I mean, just really amazing conversations, and I love that it's not a conference, that it is a conversation, and that we are getting to hear really in-depth stories from people who love the church and who are doing wonderful things in the church. So I just want to say thank you to Missional Voices. It's just been a privilege to be a part of it and to listen to all of this great ministry. And I tell you, that is so encouraging when you're doing hard work in the church. To hear the wonderful things that other people are doing is the encouragement that I think we all need. So thank you. And thank you to Missional Voices for encouraging all of us.
Thank you for coming. And,
you bet.
We'll be back at 2 o'clock with our normal programming, and catch us there. Thanks.